The first time I realized my life wasn't mine to live, I was 17. It was a gray, rainy Saturday morning in suburban Illinois. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee steaming in my hands, laptop open, spreadsheets scattered around me. Every cent I earned from my 2 part-time jobs seemed like a drop in a bottomless well. Tuition, groceries, rent, small emergencies. It was all on me. And yet, I had somehow been made to feel I was not enough, that my efforts were invisible. He didn't just walk. He paraded, every step a silent announcement that the world belonged to him. His grin, smug, arrogant, made my skin crawl. I hated him, not just because of his laziness, but because Mom and Dad had always treated him like royalty, while I worked myself to exhaustion. "Hey, Julie," he said casually, tossing his backpack onto the counter. "Mom says don't worry about the car loan. They'll handle it." "Well, you'll handle it." I froze. My coffee trembled in my hand. Did he just say what I thought he said? What do you mean I'll handle it?" I asked, voice shaking despite my attempt at calm. Mom, flipping pancakes as if everything was normal, didn't even look at me. "Julie, sweetie, Kyle needs the car for school. We thought it would be easiest if you took care of it. He has other priorities." "Other priorities?" I repeated, incredulous. "Like sitting here while I pay for everything?" Dad, leaning casually against the counter with a cup of coffee, sighed like I had interrupted his peace. "Julie, it's just easier this way. Kyle is our son. We're making sure he doesn't have to stress. You've got a job, right?" I wanted to scream. The same parents who had scolded me for buying a $7 latte now expected me to fund Kyle's entire life. Tuition, car, groceries, weekend trips, while he lounged there smiling like the luckiest kid alive. "I'm not your ATM," I said, hands trembling. Kyle laughed, that infuriating laugh that I had hated since middle school. "Relax, sis. Mom and Dad already said it." "Don't worry about it." The air in the kitchen thickened, suffocating me. Mom's patronizing smile, the one she always used when she wanted me to obey, made my skin crawl. "Julie, don't be dramatic," she said. "It's family. Families help each other." "Families don't exploit each other," I muttered under my breath, loud enough for Dad to hear. His face darkened. "You'll do it, Julie," he said, voice low and dangerous. "It's for Kyle. You should be grateful." Grateful? I wanted to throw the chair across the kitchen. I wanted to rip the pancakes from the stove. I wanted them to feel the betrayal they were shoving in my face. But I didn't. I swallowed my fury and retreated to my room. That night, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. Anger churned inside me. Betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about respect, about being seen as a human, not a bank. Anger turned to resolve. If they wanted me to pay, they were in for a shock. I wouldn't just give in. I wouldn't be their ATM. I began making mental notes. Kyle's arrogance made him careless. He would reveal everything if I listened closely. Mom and Dad's obsession with appearances could be manipulated. Every lie, every slip was a weapon I could use. Weeks passed, each day heavier than the last. Every family dinner became a battlefield. Kyle smirked at every turn. Mom insisted on her family fairness speeches. Dad's eyes drilled into me silently, warning me to comply. Every day I reminded myself, patience is my weapon. Watch, wait, learn. Then came the first real shock. I found it accidentally, a bank statement that wasn't meant for me. Hidden accounts, hidden investments, hidden money. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. And they had never told me. Not once. The shock hit me like a punch to the gut. I had been working 2 jobs, sacrificing sleep, weekends, my health, while they lied and pretended I couldn't help financially. For the first time, I felt power. But power without a plan was useless. I needed strategy, patience, and timing. I began watching, listening, taking notes. Every careless comment Kyle made, every secretive whisper between my parents, every slip, they were giving me pieces of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I needed. Kyle tried to provoke me several times. One night, after dinner, he leaned against the kitchen counter. You think you're clever, huh? He sneered. Messing around with money you don't understand? I understand more than you think, I replied, stepping closer. You've been enjoying life at my expense for too long. That ends now, he laughed nervously. And what? You're going to— No threats, I interrupted, ice cold. Just consequences. Every action has them. You'll see soon enough. For the first time, I saw doubt in his eyes, a tiny crack in his armor, and it felt glorious. I confided in my best friend Mia, but carefully, only partially revealing the truth. This isn't just about money, I whispered under the bleachers at school. It's about respect, about power, about making them realize I'm not their servant, their ATM. Mia's eyes widened. Julie, just be careful. If they even suspect— I've been careful my entire life, I said. Now I need to be smart. But careful? No, not anymore. I want them to feel it, all of it. At home, tensions escalated. Kyle continued his careless arrogance. One evening, he left his phone on the kitchen counter. A single text from a friend revealed everything. A weekend trip fully funded by me. I felt a flicker of satisfaction. Evidence was piling up. Soon everyone would see. One night, I overheard Mom and Dad arguing. She's too suspicious, Mom hissed. I don't want her finding out about the accounts. Dad's voice was low, dangerous. We just need to keep her busy. She'll never figure it out if we play it right. I froze. They thought they were plotting against me. They thought they were clever. But I had been watching, listening, learning. Every secret they whispered, every lie they tried to hide. They were handing me the perfect weapon. By the end of the week, Kyle was jittery, Mom was pacing constantly, and Dad's composure had cracked entirely. I smiled quietly. The pieces were in place. Soon, the world they thought they controlled would crumble around them, and I, Julie, would be the one holding the strings. The following morning, I confronted Kyle in the kitchen. His eyes widened as I leaned over him. You think everything is easy, don't you? I said. You think I've been paying for everything and just smiling while you live like a king? You think I don't notice? His fork froze midair. Fear, real fear, flashed across his face. The smirk was gone. For the first time, I saw him truly vulnerable. After that morning confrontation with Kyle, I knew the stakes had escalated. His fear had been fleeting, but it had shown me something crucial. He could be manipulated, and his arrogance could be his downfall. I had to move carefully. Every word, every glance, every interaction counted. Over the next few days, I began observing him closely. I noticed small habits, almost trivial. The way he left receipts carelessly on the counter. The way he bragged to friends about everything Julie buys for me. The slight smirk that turned into a worried frown whenever I entered the room unexpectedly. I recorded everything mentally, noting patterns and weaknesses. At night, I pored over the documents I had discovered weeks ago. Hidden accounts, secret loans, and investments that had never been mentioned to me. It was all there. I realized something chilling. My parents were skilled liars, but even liars have vulnerabilities. And every time Kyle boasted or slipped up, they revealed themselves in tiny, careless ways. That evening, as he sprawled across the living room couch playing video games, I casually mentioned a fictional late payment on his car loan. I watched him freeze mid-controller movement, eyes darting around the room. "What do you mean?" he asked, voice unsteady. "Oh, nothing," I said sweetly. "Just wondering if maybe I should have saved more from my last paycheck to cover it." His face went pale. The subtle twitch in his jaw told me he was calculating something, panicking internally, realizing he had no idea how much I knew or how precise I could be. Mom and Dad had begun to behave differently. Mom's smiles were tighter, forced. Dad avoided my gaze. One evening, I overheard them talking in hushed tones. "We can't let her find out about the accounts," Mom whispered. "She's too smart, too observant. She'll expose everything." "We just need to keep her distracted," Dad replied. "She's too careful. But if we're sloppy, she'll see through us." I felt a dark thrill. They were playing checkers, but I was already thinking in chess moves. I began planting accidental hints about financial mistakes, mismanaged bills, and minor discrepancies. I wanted them to feel the tension I had been living with for years, even if they didn't know how aware I truly was. Meanwhile, Kyle's behavior grew reckless. He began spending more money without thinking, leaving credit card bills and receipts lying around. He believed I was oblivious, that I would pay as always. I let him think that, carefully observing his mistakes. Each slip was another building block for my ultimate plan. One night I found him on the phone, whispering to a friend. "Julie literally buys everything for me. Tuition, gas, even my weekend trips. She's crazy, I swear. She's too obsessed with numbers, but it's funny, right?" I closed the door silently, my mind racing. That conversation was a confession. He was giving me ammunition without realizing it. I decided to expand my strategy. It wasn't enough to manipulate Kyle. I needed the entire household's complicity to unravel. I began small. Casual questions to Mom. "Did you check the credit card statement this month?" I asked, innocently flipping through papers. Mom's hand froze mid-motion. Yes, everything's fine," she stammered. A subtle victory. Each reaction they gave me was carefully noted, stored in my mental ledger. They were showing me their weaknesses. I started planning my moves in multiple directions. Kyle, make him doubt his invincibility. Make him slip further. Mom and Dad, subtly reveal their lies. Make them paranoid. Evidence. Organize all financial documents, receipts, and records into a master file. Allies. Confide carefully in Mia, ensuring someone outside the household knew the basics, in case things spiraled out of control. I discovered an envelope hidden behind a stack of old magazines in Dad's office. Inside, a series of checks, large sums of money written in his handwriting, marked with cryptic labels like "for emergencies" and "future security." Enough money to cover every expense I had been forced to pay for years, and yet, I had never been told about it. The realization hit me. My parents had been exploiting me while pretending I couldn't help, all while hiding resources from me. I sat down on the floor staring at the envelope. Anger, betrayal, and exhilaration surged through me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control, deception, and finally reclaiming my power. Days turned into a tense routine of observation, planning, and psychological maneuvering. I watched Kyle carefully. He continued to slip, leaving evidence of careless spending. He boasted to friends, bragged about everything Julie pays for me, and never suspected I was cataloging every detail. Meanwhile, my parents were on edge. Mom whispered constantly on the phone. Dad avoided me whenever possible. They were finally feeling a fraction of the tension and suspicion I had endured for years. I began planting subtle clues for Kyle, letting him feel the pressure, but never revealing the full scope of my knowledge. "You might want to double-check the car insurance bill," I said one evening casually. "I noticed it was unusually high this month." His eyes flickered nervously. Yeah, maybe." "Thanks," I smiled inwardly. He was panicking, unsure, feeling the consequences of a world he had always taken for granted. At school, I expanded my network carefully. I hinted to teachers and friends that I was under financial pressure. Not too much, just enough to keep rumors circulating. It wasn't malicious, just a way to create small ripples that would eventually magnify tension in the household. Weeks later, I overheard Mom again. "I don't know how she figured out so much," she whispered to Dad. "She's too careful." "We have to be more careful," I smirked silently. They didn't realize that I had been planning this for weeks, studying them, cataloging everything, and waiting for the perfect moment. Kyle, now jittery and suspicious, began making mistakes faster. I watched him leave receipts, forget to hide certain purchases, and even whisper to friends about my controlling nature, perfectly oblivious that I was fully aware of every word. One rainy evening, as Kyle bragged to a friend in the kitchen, I calmly laid out the evidence, receipts, bank statements, and detailed notes. His face turned pale, his mouth opened, then closed. He stammered, trying to deny, to laugh it off, but there was no escape. "I had him. You think you're untouchable," I said softly. "You think I just pay for everything without noticing? You think Mom and Dad's lies are hidden from me? Not anymore." The fear in his eyes was intoxicating. For the first time, I saw him vulnerable, helpless, completely exposed. And for the first time, I felt the full weight of my control. That night, I overheard Mom on the phone. "She's discovered everything." "Julie knows? We have to stop her before she exposes us." I smiled, my pulse quickening. They had finally realized the consequences of underestimating me. But it was too late. I was already in motion. I had the evidence, the plan, and the patience to make them all pay. The stage was set. The trap was ready. And the world they had built on lies and exploitation was about to collapse under my hands. I had rehearsed the moment in my head 1,000 times. Not the gory fantasies, not the petty imaginings some nights in the dark. Those were indulgences. What I rehearsed, again and again, was the precise unveiling. Who would hear what, at what moment, and how I would make sure the truth landed where it hurt most. The plan wasn't complicated. It was surgical. Step 1, secure the evidence. Step 2, neutralize their escape routes. Step 3, expose them in a way that left no wiggle room, no denials, no gaslight, no misunderstandings. Step 4, walk away on my own terms. I set the pieces into motion 2 days before Thanksgiving, a time when their attention would be divided and when appearances mattered to them more than usual. People dress up for family, smile for photographs, perform gratitude like a ritual. They loved the ritual because it let them pretend everything was fine. Perfect timing. The morning I decided to strike, the house hummed with small tasks. Mom was in the pantry fussing over the pie crust, her laughter a brittle, practiced thing. Dad was in the garage, pretending he was inspecting the car while checking his phone for messages. Kyle was in his room, headphones on, oblivious. I moved quietly. I'd already copied every file, every statement, every photograph into encrypted drives weeks earlier. I'd printed the ones that mattered and placed them in folders. Now I gathered them into a slim binder, my ugly little Bible of truth. The pages were clinical. Account numbers, transfer records, photos of checks, texts where Kyle bragged, copies of admissions notices and proof of payment, receipts with my name on them that matched purchases they said didn't happen. I had everything an objective eye would need. I didn't want to humiliate anyone without first removing their ability to hide. The accounts had to be frozen so the money couldn't be shuffled away. The private emails had to be backed up. The insurance and loan companies had to be alerted. I had no illusions of doing this pro bono. I called in favors, one by one, people I'd helped, people who owed me small kindnesses. Mia answered on the second ring. "I need you to meet me downtown this morning," I said. "For what?" she asked. "You remember Leo at the bank? He owes you a favor from that internship? I need him to place a temporary freeze on a specific account. No explanations." "I have the documentation. It's urgent." There was a long pause. Then, "Yuli, if you're doing this, I'm there." She showed up 30 minutes later with Leo, a compact, serious man who kept eye contact and had a badge. He scanned my binder and didn't look surprised. People like him had seen 1,000 small domestic tragedies wrapped in numbers. He made a few calls, typing on a laptop in the nearest cafe so casually people thought he was checking email. Within an hour, the accounts were flagged for review. The bank wouldn't touch a wire. Credit cards were on hold. Leo didn't ask what I planned to do with the information. He didn't need to. I felt the first thin thread of triumph when I saw the confirmation emails. They were small victories, administrative but irreversible in the timeline of their lies. Step 2 was social. I knew what institutions my parents cared about more than us: the PTA, the church board, the neighborhood association. They cultivated appearances with surgical care. That's where I'd aim the spotlight. I began with Kyle. I'd arranged for a quiet meeting with his scholarship. Office, anonymously flagged with documentation. I'd prepared proving that tuition had been paid by third parties. under false pretenses, and that there were irregularities. The office needed to investigate. I didn't need Kyle to lose his scholarship. I needed the panic, the investigation, the public cooling of his pride. When the office called the house and asked for documentation, their voice had that formal, careful tone. "We're reviewing your account." Panic sounded like a small animal trapped in a tin can over the phone. I'd listened in from the driveway, hidden, hearing his breath hitch. Then I turned to the wider net. I printed copies of the binder and mailed them, no name attached, to 3 people I knew my parents couldn't lie to. Aunt Lorraine in Ohio, who still ran the annual family donations list. Pastor Hargrove, who'd been Dad's semi-official conscience for 20 years. And Ellen at the Neighborhood Association, who kept meeting minutes and liked moral clarity. Each envelope included copies of bank statements, text message printouts, and a short, dispassionate cover letter. "We believe you should know something about the X family's finances that affects many in our community." I didn't watch as the dominoes fell that day. Privacy laws protected me from some of the fallout, but I did receive an unexpected text from Aunt Lorraine that evening. 3 words. "Something's wrong." She posted a comment on a family group chat that said simply, "We need to talk." I could have exposed everything publicly, posted everything online, let 1,000 strangers judge them, but I wanted weight. I wanted their circle to know, to feel the shame in the places that mattered. Social media might snack and move on. A call from the scholarship office didn't. The Thanksgiving gathering was the moment I'd chosen for the reveal, and I worked it like a director. I arrived late, hands empty, smile practiced. The house smelled of roast and old anger. Cousins I'd not seen in years hugged me. Small talk scraped the surface. The family photos already displayed on the mantel were perfect in an ugly way. Smiling faces, perfect teeth. They were the product of my parents' careful curation, and I meant to puncture them. When everyone sat down and the obligatory prayers were over, I stood up. The room quieted. Dad's jaw tightened in that way I'd learned to read, a sign that he suspected and was too proud to ask. "Before we eat," I said, and heard 10 heads tilt toward me like sunflowers. "There's something I'd like to share." You could have heard a pin drop. Even Kyle was silent, head down, face pale. I put the binder on the table and opened it. Pages fluttered. Somebody laughed nervously. I didn't speak for a long second, tasting the moment like a sommelier tasting a wine. Then I began. "This is not about money," I said. "It's about trust, about lies, about the way you told me I was the one who had to make everything work while you hid what you had." I pointed to the first page. A bank statement, highlighted. "This is a fund. It has been built and accumulated for years. My name was never mentioned. Why not? Because it would mean acknowledging that I am part of this family, not your credit line." I watched faces change. Mom went from burnt sugar smile to a trembling, preened anxiety. Dad's hands clamped on the table so hard the napkin trembled. Kyle's eyes were enormous. I let them look at the evidence. I read paragraphs of text messages aloud. Kyle's boasting, Dad's quiet promises that we'll handle it, and Mom's conversations that called me too suspicious. Every sentence landed like a stone. The room received it like rain that had been held back for years. People asked questions, shocked, quiet ones at first, then louder. Cousins started whispering. Aunt Lorraine's face, when I met her eye, was slow and horrified. That was the moment I knew I had won the theater. And then Dad tried to speak. "Julie, you can't do this here," he said, voice brittle. "This is a family gathering." "This is our family," I replied. "And families deserve the truth." He looked at me with that furious, wounded arrogance of a man who'd been cornered by the person he thought he controlled. He tried to wave it away to claim misinterpretation, but Aunt Lorraine held up her phone. She'd received the anonymous packet, and she wanted answers. Pastor Hargrove cleared his throat politely, then said the sort of things church leaders say when doctrine collides with human mess. The room began to fracture. People took sides without meaning to. Kyle, who had been the picture of bravado for so long, began to complain about the scholarship office, about reputational damage. Friends on the phone demanded confirmations. The neighborhood association quietly postponed an upcoming event that would have allowed Dad to speak about family values. I wasn't satiated by humiliation. I wanted consequences that would change behavior, and I wanted them to pay for the economy of lies they'd created. So I had one final card. I slid another envelope across the table to Pastor Hargrove. "These are copies of all our communications with loan offices and creditors," I said. "They're going to review them. They'll decide if any legal action is needed. I'm prepared to testify." The room went colder. In the days that followed, my parents moved through a new world. Interviews, phone calls, investigations. The bank's forensic team came, the scholarship office requested a meeting, and Aunt Lorraine convened a small family council. No one called it revenge in printed words. They called it reconciliation or clarification. But the result was the same. Our household, once a place of quiet cruelty, was now noisy with consequence. Kyle tried to defend himself on social media, making a graceless, half-hearted post about family, mistakes, and gratitude. People who had known him in high school commented, "I had no idea." The scholarship office accepted his account for review. His immediate access to funds was paused pending clarification. He called me, voice high with panic. "Julie, please, I didn't know, I didn't—" "You didn't have to know," I said cold. "You just had to stop taking." Dad, who had prided himself on authority, had a meeting with a financial counselor arranged by his workplace benefits. The counselor's questions were precise. Why was this fund undisclosed? Who authorized transfers? Where did the money go? People used words like fiduciary duty and conflict. It was the sort of language people use when the veneer has been stripped. Mom, who had invested so much of her identity and social reputation, was the quietest of all. She stopped going to the neighborhood events she'd loved. Her contact list slowed. She called me once, late at night, voice small and unmoored. "Julie," she whispered, "I never meant—" "You meant exactly what you did," I said. "You lied. You hid things. You treated me like the only thing that mattered was what I would give. That's what you meant," she cried then, small, brittle sobs I'd only heard once before when Dad lost his job a decade earlier. I didn't comfort her. I had waited a long time for this moment. Cruelty exacted itself in long arcs. People, always hungry for narrative, picked sides. Some relatives condemned my tactics as harsh. They said I should have confronted them privately. I agreed in part. I had confronted them privately and had been ignored. Their objections were the clumsy cover of people unwilling to see the scale of the deception. Others supported me, quietly offering help, meals, the sorts of small kindnesses that rebuild. My ally list quietly lengthened. Mia stayed close, practical and steady. Leo visited unexpectedly, bringing coffee and an assurance in his eyes like, "You did the right thing." Aunt Lorraine called me and said, "We're going to make sure this never happens again to anyone." It wasn't a public promise, but her voice carried weight through our broader family network. A month later, things had calmed into a grim new normal. The bank's review continued. The scholarship office had reinstated Kyle on a provisional basis, contingent on a repayment plan, and the family demonstrating transparency. Dad had agreed to counseling and to a meeting with a lawyer to sort finances. Mom had stepped down from the neighborhood board. People whispered. Some doors closed. Some opened in empathy. I didn't dance on the ruins. Victory had a hollow center, like an old house stripped of paint. The satisfaction was tempered. Seeing people stumble awake from a long, comfortable sleep is not clean joy. It is messy, human, and a little lonely. My relationships were changed. Some for worse, some for better. On a cool evening, after the official meetings had started and the furious phone calls had ceased, I sat on my porch with Mia. The sun had dipped. The air smelled of wood smoke. She handed me a thermos and asked quietly, "Do you regret it?" For a long moment, I didn't answer. I thought of the nights I'd worked, the days I'd swallowed my resentment, the moments I'd been reduced to a number on a calculator. I thought of the way Kyle's face had gone slack when he realized he couldn't laugh this away. "No," I said finally. I don't regret standing up for myself. "I regret it took me this long," she nodded. "Do you think they'll change?" "I don't know," I admitted. "People change in fits, not in symphonies. But they'll remember. And maybe remembering is the beginning." The last act of the story wasn't an exciting courtroom drama or a cinematic arrest. It was quieter, a small act of autonomy. I had saved more than anger in those months. I'd saved money, my own money, untouched by guilt or duty. I put a down payment on a small studio apartment 2 towns over. I signed the lease with my name. It felt like the smallest rebellion and the largest one at once. The night I moved out, Mom didn't throw a party. She didn't stand on the porch and wave. Dad didn't hand me the keys to the family car. Kyle, shell-shocked and quieter for once, helped carry a box to my car without making a joke. He said awkwardly, I hope it goes well." It was almost an apology. Clumsy, immature, but real. I left without shouting. I left because I could. That was the point. Months later, at a courthouse hearing that settled some account details, I sat with Aunt Lorraine and Mia. The judge recommended mediation. The word accountability appeared in typed documents. It wasn't total justice, rarely is, but the scales had shifted. On my drive back, I pulled over by a small park and sat in the car, hands on the steering wheel. The radio murmured music that once might have felt like background noise. I let myself think about later things: college, actual freedom, the small joys I had postponed while carrying other people's expectations. Someone once told me revenge is a dead thing, cold and pointless. I don't agree. What I did wasn't about cruelty. It was reclamation. I'd taken back the narrative, the ledger of my life. I'd made them face the human cost of their choices. They still had to live with the consequences they'd engineered. So did I. We all did. I started the engine, and as I drove away from the town that had been my cage, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself in years. Calm. Not the frantic, brittle kind, but a quiet, hard-won steadiness. My name was mine again. A year after the reveal, I received an unexpected message from Kyle. No smirks, no boasting, simply, "Can we talk?" I want to understand. I sat with it for a long while. Understanding is not the same as forgiveness. But I drove to meet him, not because I wanted to roll back time, but because I wanted to know whether the boy who had once shrugged at others' suffering could learn something real. We met at a diner. Late, water beaded on the windows. He looked smaller in that fluorescent light, like the arrogance had been leached out by reality. He said things I didn't expect. I thought life would always be easy. I didn't see the rest. He didn't excuse himself. He asked questions instead. We didn't fix everything. We started haltingly with the small things. He agreed to therapy, to help with the restitution plan, to call Aunt Lorraine when he wanted to vent instead of scheming. Small seeds. I don't write the end of the story as triumphal. The truth doesn't tidy itself that way. But I will say this. I left with the ledger closed in front of me, and enough pages empty to write a life that wasn't spent repaying someone else's lies. When I returned to the apartment, my apartment, I unlocked the door and looked around at boxes that were now furniture. It felt like a new sentence written in my own hand. Outside, the city hummed. Upstairs, someone practiced piano. Beyond the noise, beyond the scandal and the trembling, a small, steady life waited, one I had built by refusing to be anything but myself, and that was more than enough. If you liked my story, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with as many people as possible. Thanks for watching.